Hello and welcome to the second episode of our tiny podcast. I'm your host, Claudio, creative producer at Cartesi, and today we're talking about the essential roles sequencers will play in scaling blockchain. With me today is Benedikt Bünz, co-founder and CTO of Espresso Systems. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Benedikt Bünz. I'm the co-founder and the Chief Scientist at Espresso Systems, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do. I'm also a professor at NYU in computer science, working on cryptography, zero knowledge proofs, a lot of different cryptography related to blockchains.
Nice. All right, then let's dive into it. What does Espresso do?
So at Espresso, we're building a so-called shared decentralized sequencers. So there are, over the last couple of years, we've seen the emergence of these rollups. So for example, Cartesi is one of all of these amazing rollups. But one big question is, so these rollups basically allow you to show that you did some state updates correctly. So you process the number of transactions correctly, either through a zero knowledge proof or through optimistic fraud proofs. But there's one big question, which is who actually gets to decide what transactions get processed? And in fact, the other question is in what order do they get processed? So this is called the sequencer. And a lot of the times until now, the sequencer is some centralized party. So it's just some server that is running, that is deciding what transactions get included or not included. However, this is very much against the spirit of blockchains because now suddenly the sequencer has a lot of control, right? They can, set the fees, they can, blacklist transactions. And the other issue is that now each rollup has one of these separate sequencers. And the difficulty with that is that one of the main ideas of blockchains is that it enables interoperability. Interoperability, sort of seamless interoperability means between many different applications. However, now we've gone a little bit back, at least temporarily, to these walled gardens, where each rollup ecosystem or each rollup has their own walled garden, and it's really hard to then interact with applications in another walled garden. So what we do is we're building a shared decentralized sequencer. So this is a consensus protocol, so a proof-of-stake consensus protocol, whose only job it is to basically order transactions. So it takes in transactions, it doesn't process them, it doesn't look at them. It's very, very lightweight, which is why it can be super efficient. And it orders them and basically says, like, these transactions are included and these are not, and in this order. And then we work with rollups like Cartesi, who then process these transactions. And one thing that is cool is that multiple rollups can use the same sequencer. So you can then have some global order of all of the transactions. And this allows you to basically then have more interaction and bridges and all of these things between different rollup systems.
All right. Well, as you mentioned at the beginning of your explanation, that we already had centralized sequencers. You guys chose to take on the establishment, if you will, to change the nature of those, right? Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but still, there were solutions in place. How has that journey been?
Yeah, I think it's been, the reception has been quite amazing, to be honest. And I think it really comes from the deep ethos that exists in the blockchain community that sort of realize the inherent danger of these centralized walled garden solutions. I think that it's centralized solutions are always easier, right? It's very easy to sort of get that started.
Of course.
But they have very important sort of long-term downsides, right? They create monopolists, they create, single points of failure. So there's really baked into the blockchain ethos is this aversion against centralized sequencers. So I think everybody understood that kind of, this component needs to be decentralized. And this is why we've seen sort of an amazing reception from these rollups who are eager to work with us and to use us and to play around with us, and especially rollups like Cartesi who sort of storm ahead and do integrations. And that's really great to see. It obviously, also puts the pressure on us, right? Like we need to deliver a really good product that can handle, the efficiency requirements of all of these rollups and, competes with kind of like people want to use a decentralized solution, but they don't want to give up on all the benefits and efficiencies of centralized solutions. So, this puts sort of the goalpost quite high, but, this is where we're working hard and trying to achieve
that. Well, you already mentioned a few characteristics that set that set your sequencer apart from centralized sequencers. Can you name any other? What makes you guys our best option?
I think the core idea is that we want to actually try to achieve the same efficiency, right? Like the one thing that a centralized sequencer gives you, it's incredibly fast. Like there's no way around this. It's just a single server that you can scale up and that runs software. And we know how to do this, like through years of, this is how the internet works. So our goal is to basically be able to achieve the same efficiency while still giving you the decentralized security and not having basically not having any sort of single points of failure. And the other big thing that we're working on is the shared aspect of the sequencer, right? So if you have a centralized sequencer, then one problem is that, say, I don't know, Cartesi has a sequencer, and I don't know, Arbitrum has a sequencer, and like ZK Sync has a sequencer, then they're all going to be separate, right? And there's almost no world in which everybody would agree to run on the same centralized sequencer, right? Like how would these teams, agree on that, right? Like it seems almost laughable, exactly. So what we're trying to do is to build a decentralized system that everybody can plug in, and, really different softwares can plug in. This is why, we have to build our software to be, all it does is it orders the transactions. It doesn't even care about what they look like. If they're ZK rollup transactions, that's okay. If they're optimistic rollup transactions, that's okay. If they do something else, that's okay as well. So all we do is order these transactions, and but it turns out, this sort of is a little bit more complicated technically, but it turns out if suddenly all of these transactions, if there's a global order, then I can do things like say, okay, I want to have an atomic transaction. So I want to say that, okay, I want to include this transaction on Cartesi, but only if this transaction on Arbitrum is also included. So you can, for example, do some atomic swap, right? Like I can sell one thing on N1 and do another thing, or I don't know, right? Like it opens up a lot of possibilities, and we're putting out more and more content about what you can actually do with this. But this shared aspect, I think, is sort of the decentralized aspect is sort of the initial thing that we're advocating. But I think long term, it's really the shared aspect, which wouldn't work without the decentralized aspect, that basically gives you a lot of benefits and sort of reunifies the interoperability of kind of this L2 ecosystem.
So in a way, if I'm understanding this right, you're allowing different rollup chains or different apps, dApps, to communicate with each other through your sequencer.
Yes, exactly that.
That's crazy. I mean,
right, exactly, right. But we need it. Like I think that, like, this is like, it's the biggest challenge, right? Like we cannot, I don't think we want to move to a blockchain world where, each application, runs their own thing, and it's hard for the applications to interoperate, right? Then we may as well have Web2 applications.
It kind of defeats the whole idea.
Right. It sort of defeats at least a key part of the idea. And that is exactly why we're working on what we're working on. And that's also why, we've announced, it's growing every day, but we've announced sort of a number of partnerships that with many different types of rollups even, that I think we're at like 15 or something like this, 15 different rollups and partners already, and sort of more are coming on every day. Yeah, that's kind of the goal, is to sort of get as broad of a view as possible, and we want to be neutral, right? Like we don't care what kind of rollup you are, like we want to be able to support.
The more the merrier, I guess.
Exactly.
Well, even though I think you're part of the answer, or Espresso is part of the answer to the next question, still, what do you think Web3 needs to make the next big leap forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's sort of the boring answer is kind of boring because it's sort of been the same answer for many different years, but it's we need to scale. We need to scale broadly in all directions and everything, and we're still not there. It's like the sort of the answer has been the same, but like we've gotten better and better over the years, and I think rollups are a huge part of that solution. And with that then comes, I think this will enable sort of really cool new apps and really make the developer experience much better. Now I guess on Cartesi I can just write a Linux program and run it on there. That's amazing, right? Like that's so cool, and really this is that should be the goal. That should be sort of the standard that we set ourselves. And yeah, I think we still have a ways to go, but I think now we see the road ahead that leads us to sort of a level of scalability that enables mass adoption. I mean, in the end, the goal is sort of mass adoption, but I think for that we still need to scale, and it's easy to get confused in the blockchain space because the noise goes up and down with the price of things. But if you look underneath at the technological development, that's much more linear and much more steady. It goes up during peak times, but it also goes up during sort of crypto winters. And I've been in this space for a very long time, and sort of that it makes me optimistic. And I think I'm today as optimistic as I've ever been about the space as a whole. And then there come other questions, about user experience and all of these things. But I think at the end it just starts with the core product. The infrastructure just has to be able to support all the cool things that people want to build.
Absolutely. If the whole world would decide to join Web3 tomorrow,
yes,
we'd have a small problem.
We have a small problem, but I think we're getting there, and I think that's amazing.
In terms of scalability, I just saw this Twitter post from my own colleague Karsten, who did a 17 megabyte transaction on your sequencer, I believe.
Yeah, that was really cool. I think so. I think what happened is that he essentially took our software and connected it with Cartesi software, and he pushed to our sequencer, and it shows both. I think it was I was like so hyped when I saw that, because I think it showed both the capabilities of Cartesi, but it also showed the capability of the Espresso sequencer, that we could handle that with no problem, no nothing. And yeah, I think that's cool. Like that's what we want to see. I was very excited about that.
Same here, man. I mean, it's nice to have Linux running on chain and have all this computational power, but if we can't put it through to the next step, which would be you guys,
yes,
it doesn't make that much sense.
Right. Exactly. And this is why we wanna work with rollups and applications that push the limits and things. I think Cartesi is on the forefront of that. Of like if you ask me even a year ago, should I do 17 megabyte transactions on a blockchain or anything close to that? I'm like, don't do that. But now it's not just theoretically possible. It's we've seen it and people are just implementing it, and yeah, that's so exciting.
Then maybe we should talk again in a year, and maybe then we can discuss the 17 gigabyte transaction that we just got through.
Exactly.
Let's hope so.
Exactly. Like I'm super excited for that. I want to see it.
Yeah, that would be nice. All right. Well, Benedikt, 15 minutes up. Exactly 15 minutes. So thanks for your time and your answers, and we'll see each other in a year.
Sounds good. Bye.
Ciao. All right. This was the second episode of our tiny podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Please tune in again next week when I'm joined by Andy and Robbie, founders of the Rollup, a YouTube channel full of educational blockchain content with everything you need to know, from DeFi to infrastructure.